Okay, so now we kind of get into the rational functions. So I don't know that this one has a specific name, it's just 1 over x. And so, of course, this one does have a divide by 0 issue, right? And that's going to happen when x is equal to 0. So we've got to throw that out of the domain. So we're going to write domain is just x not equal to 0, or in interval notation, negative infinity to 0, union 0 to infinity. And this one's range is exactly the same. We can say the range is y not equal to 0, or we can write it negative infinity to 0, because as we travel up the y-axis, we see that we have a function somewhere to the left or the right for all values until we get to 0. And we got to hop over 0, and then we continue on, we have a function. So 0 to infinity. Then kind of closely related is going to be the function 1 over x squared. So of course now we can't have any, we're not going to have any negative outputs because we're squaring whatever our input is. But we do have our domain now is still everything except x equals 0. So negative infinity to 0, 0 to infinity. But our range, you'll notice there's nothing down here in the negative y's. So here we've got y greater than 0 for our range because it's not ever going to equal 0, right? Because 1 over, 10 million squared is still ever so slightly bigger than 0. So if we write that in interval notation, 0 to infinity, all good. And our last toolbox function is the absolute value function. This one has a name. Of course, we'll have to go back. There we go. Absolute value function. And so again, you should know the general shapes for all of these. By the time you do the homework, you should have them down pretty well. So absolute value function here, of course, we can plug in any number, negative or positive. There's no divide by zeros to worry about. There's no x is the denominator, so there's no radicals, so we don't need to worry about imaginary numbers. So all real numbers for our domain. Our range, though, we can see again, nothing down here. So we are looking at 0 to infinity. But this time around, 0 is included. So we could write that as y greater than or equal to 0 for our range. All right, so really all we have left, I think, is some piecewise functions, and that'll be the last part of this chapter.